more money is lost by chasing something someone already did than you could even imagine.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you handsome, deep-bassed son of a bitch. How are you?
Yeah, I've been getting some feedback that I get this new microphone is picking up the deep bass in my voice. It's rattling a little too much, so I've been playing with the features on this new amp I've got to try to sound less Barry White on this podcast.
What's the line? You can be the bass, I can be the treble.
If it ain't got bass, get it out of my face is I think the line that you're looking for.
So I was at
EPMD.
Speaking of bass, so I showed my 7-year-old, maybe 5-year-old nephew at the time. A baby got back, and now that I have children, I realize potentially I was a little ahead on showing him clips of Family Guy, and also that song. My niece had her high school graduation over the weekend, and they had like a pool party, dance party. And everybody went bananas when Baby Got Back comes on. And I got up and ran outside. I'm like, we used to dance this when you were 3. And she's like, I remember.
That's amazing. And also we used to dance to this 2 years ago also.
We still dance to it, but
still letting it fly out there.
That's exactly right.
So Alex, our podcast manager, let us know that we had some engagement on our YouTube channel, some hot engagement, few comments, and I was like, man, maybe this podcast is turning a corner. We got some new data points coming in here on our social engagement, and then I dug in a little bit, and it just seems like that was off, little too premature. I was fooled by the randomness of one kind stranger having some comments on one of our YouTube pages, which can happen to a manager from time to time. You get some encouraging news and you think it's a trend and you overreact. So I'm glad to tell you, Frankie, I didn't go spend a bunch of money on advertising and marketing based on those early comments. But that's what we're going to talk about today is when do you take new information as just a random data point? And when do you look at something as a trend that should concern you enough where you take action?
So I think you keep rolling. I have an example, but I want you to go first at the table.
Well, in 2012, I'm going to use a baseball player that both Frank and I adore because he was a Florida Marlin and also a legendary Detroit Tiger, Miguel Cabrera. Cabrera was good from the first at bat he took with the Marlins. Didn't he homer in his first at bat?
I'm still pissed. I'm still pissed they traded him.
He was, like a 19-year-old phenom. He was big. He was smooth. He made contact like Wade Boggs and hit home runs like Mark McGwire. He was everything you wanted in a hitter. Homered in his first at bat. I think he homered in his first World Series game as like a teenager that won that series. Marlins couldn't afford him, went to Detroit. In his first 3 years with Detroit was out of this world, was just as good as he was in Florida. And in 2012, I remember this, the whole month of April, he was struggling to get on base. And I watched all the Tiger games in 2012. They were loaded. It was a good team. But I remember everyone in the media was like, what's wrong with Cabrera? He just got this big contract. He's maybe didn't train as much. He didn't blah, 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 blah. And I think he hit 275 in April that year with only a couple of home runs. But I was watching the games, Frank, and he was still Miguel Cabrera. He was hard to strike out. He was making a lot of contact. He was just hitting the ball at people. He was hitting line drives all over the place. Well, luckily, Jim Leland, very smart manager, when he was asked, what are you doing to work with Miguel Cabrera? Leland was like, I'm a
Nothing.
career minor leaguer. I never hit 350 in a season, let alone 8 seasons in a row the way Miggy did. I'm not doing shit. He's going to end up playing to the back of his baseball card, is what Leland's response was, which you would expect that from a Jim Leland, right? Like, I'm not saying anything to him. He's a good hitter.
Leland was in a bad mood because he was off of his trend of 5 packs of cigarettes in a day. He was down at the beginning of 2012. The news finally reached him that cigarettes were bad for you. He was down to 2.5 packs a day.
2.5 packs a game, not a day.
My Lord.
But anyway, as a manager, he did nothing. 2012, Miguel Cabrera, the rest of the year, played like Miguel Cabrera. He ended up winning the
Triple
MVP
crown
that year, but also won the Triple Crown, meaning he had the best average, he had the most RBIs, and he had the most home runs. Thank God that Jim Leland was a smart enough manager to say, we're going to leave him alone and he's going to play to the back of his baseball card. He was not fooled by randomness. And this happens, I'm using one example. There are countless examples of all-star baseball players who statistically had bad Aprils and ended up playing just the way you could go down the list of Hall of Fame players. Almost every one of them had at least one April that wasn't great coming out of the gate. Baseball is a game where you can get fooled by randomness. You can, if you use a short measuring period of only a few weeks, you could hit a lot of balls hard and hit it right at people. You could be a pitcher and you just didn't get the calls from the umps, or you had a couple of errors that were behind you, or not as good a defense as normal, and it looks like you're 0-4 in April. What's wrong with Tom Seaver? Nothing. Leave him alone. He's going to be fine over that time. And I find, Frank, throughout my career, I find people overreact often to a top performer having a bad month or a bad quarter. And my question always is, are you sure that they've changed, or do you think that they just are having an unlucky streak here? Has something major changed in their life? Has something major changed in the market and they're not keeping up? I like to ask a series of questions, but most of the time when people bring it up to me, it's maybe, do they know they're not performing? Yes. Are they being hard on themselves? Yes. Okay, maybe just encourage them and give them a little room to breathe. One quarter doesn't mean that they've lost it. It just might mean that they got a little unlucky.
So I'm going to give 2 examples, different ones. So fooled by randomness in this example can manifest in many different ways. If you are working out, so in the gym, working out, if you're training for muscles, the internet has been feeding me a bunch of Arnold Schwarzenegger videos lately because
you've gotten so shredded and ripped.
Well, because I actually watched Terminator a few days ago and have been asking my phone a lot of questions about it. But one of the things that came up, and one of the things from the 1970s movie Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger, is he talks about a plateau. And what a plateau is when you're doing everything right and it stalls. But if you understand what happens to the human body, what Schwarzenegger talks about is you do things different with your muscles. And that's how you break through a plateau. We talked about P90X last week. Do you remember the number one concept P90X was based on?
No.
Muscle confusion. And what muscle confusion is changing the exercise or the order of the exercise so you don't go through plateaus. So this happens in every single facet of life. And if you think of it from that perspective, you have to think about, okay, this is going to happen to me. It's going to happen to somebody else. Is it a pattern, or is it a trend, or is it a fad, right? Patterns and fads come and go, but trends tend to last. And another example of this is we've been talking about diet a lot lately. Sometimes the scale stalls out, or you go through a period where things will kind of stop for you.
And lately to Frank means the last 35 years.
48 and 50. So
you probably didn't talk about as much as a 9-year-old.
You'd be surprised. But what happens in a lot of instances is like the scale may stall. So it just happens that way. Like the weight isn't coming off, but then you take pictures of yourself, you track your calories, you check other things, and your body will react in weird ways. It's going through its own series of plateaus. But if you do the same things or the right things over and over and over again, what happens with a plateau or a stall is you break through it. What happened with Miguel Cabrera, he had 9 more incredible seasons as a major leaguer after this terrible April.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's Nassim Taleb wrote a book called "Fooled by Randomness." It's a fantastic, and he's a great writer. He also wrote the Black Swan, which is great, another great book. But the whole concept of "Fooled by Randomness," it gets into the psychology of this, that humans naturally overvalue the latest change. This is also, you could call this recency bias. We put a lot of weight on what was presented to us last. If you remember after 9/11, do you remember the first flight you got on after 9/11?
Yeah,
do you remember how nervous you were?
And I remember you couldn't stand up for like the first 30 minutes after you took off, or the last 30 minutes, 100%.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of weirdness, right? The security was crazier, everything. But I remember I had to fly to Connecticut to our headquarters. And I remember being unusually nervous on the flight, even though it didn't make much sense at all that a terrorist attack was going to happen to me from Chicago to Connecticut just because of 9/11. But I was overvaluing the last data point. And a lot of people quit traveling for years after that. It's the same with COVID. You know, a lot of people really extrapolated a small subset of data and quit living their lives in normal ways. You know, I still see people wearing masks out in public. What are we doing? Talk about overvaluing a small data set. The odds of you dying of something that you catch, not even COVID, anything, right? You got this new virus that's come out from the latest white trash cruise ship that, got some rat poop in their food. Surprising, you ate rat shit and got sick on a cruise ship. Quit doing white trash vacations, maybe, and you won't get fucking sick and die. That's my opinion, right? Sorry, Frank, I got off on a tangent there. But anyway, you see people wearing masks.
I can't wait till all the Southern managers you work with listen to this clip.
Well,
it's not just me that curses up a blue streak.
Maybe they needed to hear it. Frankie. Maybe they needed to hear it. So, but anyway, and then you see people, it's on Good Morning America every morning as I'm leaving the house. My wife's got Good Morning America on, and here's everyone talking about the newest virus that's come in. And, that to me, and we got a new visitor. Max is jumping in to show me his villains.
Speaking of randomness, this is what happens when you film from home. Say hi.
It's a very good random villain, anti-villain. It's a spy villain.
But Uncle Ian loves your
aircraft. It looks good. Max, I like it.
Go.
Speaking of fooled by randomness, that was a random event coming in.
It was so not random. I walked back and said, please don't interrupt me.
You got all these people that are wearing masks now because of the latest white trash cruise, phenomenon.
You're doubling down.
I'm doubling down. Of course you ate rat poop. You're on a friggin' Carnival cruise.
You're on a roll. Keep going.
Yeah, so anyway, the fallacy there is, we humans hate randomness. We don't the human brain doesn't like random things that are outside of our patterns. And so whenever we are confronted with an unexplained failure or success or a shock to the system, we instinctively create reasons and patterns for it after the fact. So you and I go through 9/11 and it's on TV all the time. 2 planes got hijacked, 3, and ran into 2 buildings and the Pentagon, and 1 hit a farm. 4. And so, the next time I'm on a plane, that's a random event. That's a random failure. It's a really scary one, but my head doesn't want it to be random. And so my head thinks this could happen to me on this stupid ass flight from Chicago to Connecticut, when really the odds of that happening were never lower than at the time I got on that. The security was high. It was a pain in the ass to get on that flight. You're right. They wouldn't let you get out of your seat to even go to the bathroom when you were on that flight. There were extra security sitting on the flight with guns at the time. So the truth is, I was never safer on a flight than that trip to Connecticut. But this one random outlier of 9/11 made my brain think that this was a real opportunity of happening, and that it was going to become a trend where planes were going to fly into buildings all the time.
So I think I told you this story before we hit record last week. If I told it 2 weeks ago, I apologize. So my son's homework is always on our table when I come home from work, and I get to look at it and I get to see how he did, what the teacher said. And the question was asked, and Max answered it, and he answered it correctly. And the teacher wrote, "Where did you find this?" And he goes, "In my brain," which is just amazing. Yeah. Amazing, right? So the reason that the teacher asks you for where it came from is because you want to see if it's a random happenstance, a guess, or is there a pattern behind it. So showing your work in math, understanding what the nuances is of a deal, like reading the actual prospectus, right? So like as an example of this, if you go to like Richard or Michael Burry for The Big Short, he read the physical mortgages to figure out what was behind it. And he had all this data. What people tend to do when they get fooled by things like this is they don't have the data. You use an example, I'll use another example. It's called the hot hand fallacy, which is a cognitive bias of believing a person is on a hot streak, scoring multiple baskets in a basketball game, winning at poker. And they think it's more likely to succeed just because of the fact that it just happened before, where really it was just a random series of streaks that happened to happen at kind of out of sequence for normal. We had a basketball coach when I was in sixth grade. He used to play in the NBA. And he's like, "We're going to just play the hot hand." It used to be something that was literally a trend in basketball because that was what people thought before they really stopped and did the research. What you tend to find with these things, I'm going to use an example in a couple of minutes about Moneyball. That's what Moneyball did to baseball. It really took away the things of like how this guy stands or how pretty his girlfriend is, which are random, and related it back to things that were factual. And we're getting into more and more of a world where everything runs through an app or everything runs through an algorithm, and it's a lot less about emotion. It's more about math.
I think you're hitting on something important here for managers, is being less emotional. I learned that from our CEO at MBR. He was really good at this, of just, he would call people out and just say, when you get emotional like that, I shut down because I don't make decisions that way. He used to, your old boss used to drive him nuts for a while. They've since figured out how to work together really well, obviously. But
the one whose name reminds people of the character from Seinfeld.
And he would, he would always tell him, "Stop selling. I'm not one of your prospective home buyers. I'm the CEO. What's the data? What's the trend? Do you have enough data to convince me? Don't sell." I shut down when you do that. I don't make decisions emotionally the way you do, and neither should you as an executive. And he was really big on that. He was big, and he would push back on you if he felt like he was being sold or you were making a decision based on emotions. Everything needed to be rational. And we're humans, we're wired for heuristics. I talk about heuristics on this show a lot. And a heuristic is just a brain. It's an evolutionary wiring where you have little biases that help you make decisions faster. So the brain has like two processors. It has a fast one, and that's the one that uses heuristics. That's kind of unconscious biases. Then it has slow processing, almost the way AI works now. Do you want a fast answer? Or do you want me to really put some thought into it? Do you want me to give you the quick response, or do you want choose thinking mode? The brain kind of does this too. And thinking slow is really what an executive or a manager is paid to do. You're paid to slow down. Other people around you can be losing their heads and using heuristics, but you shouldn't over respond to randomness and try to turn it into a trend, right? Like That could be Frank is competing against another builder, and that builder stole a sale from him, and Frank runs out and changes his pricing on everything because of one sale.
I'll give a
Probably not the
better
smartest thing.
I'll give a better example of this. So my business is different than most of the people who listen to this, but this is a real example, right? So we'll hear about someone who makes a humongous rip, like $100,000, a $200,000 rip on something. And in our business, we call those pukers. A puker is something we had a chance to close, had it in our grasp, wasn't just in our system, like we physically talked to somebody and someone else got that deal and they crushed it. And it really pisses you off and you can get emotional about it if it's someone who isn't as good as you. It's just a random person. They're kind of a one-off. It's like, man, I made 200 grand on one deal, and they brag about it, right? So it really gets it under your skin. And what you realize is that you didn't necessarily do something wrong. That other person just did something right. And sometimes what they do right is their timing. Like we've been following up with somebody for 3 years and they ultimately don't sell to us because the person who called them 2 days after their grandmother died is the one who bought the house because the timing was right. It's something you hear in sports all the time. It's like, okay, that was the perfect throw, but it was still intercepted. Well, if it was the perfect throw, how was it intercepted? It's because the defensive back is also a world-class athlete and made an incredible play. So sometimes you have to look at it as like, hey, everything was done properly and it still didn't have the result I wanted. But that doesn't mean you have to make wholesale changes and completely eradicate most of your staff or your business because just one person did something incredible.
For you, Frank, when you when you look at building and look at comps, I think this is important to stay on this because comps are a major part of your business. Being able to read, you're really good at this, at looking at comps and not overreacting. I think that could also happen where you see one recent comp and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm going to buy more lots in that zip code, or I'm going to buy more, I'm going to build more of that type of house. I'm not going to just renovate these. I'm going to knock these down and build. And you put a whole bunch of money in on one comp. That's one data point. That one survived and got paid up, but how deep is the market? So maybe share with people how you think about comps, because I think this fits into the narrative we're talking about here of getting fooled by randomness.
So we're doing a deal right now, and we're going to lose money on it. I'm certain of it. When we put the house under contract about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and what we always do in our process is we check with the realtor who's going to sell it for us, and we make sure that they verify our number. So it was January, February, March, Q1 2025. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier today. Liberation Day, which is the day the tariffs went in place, drastically changed the home buying market because it screwed with consumer confidence. So there was a drop in pricing. So that happens in sometimes. And again, talk about fooled by randomness. We did not know what that was going to mean. What it was campaigned on, like that was a shock to the system we had to deal with. But we had a comp, and I sent it to the realtor. And someone on my staff sent it over, and they confirmed with us the price was, they said it was $645,000, which is a good number. So we're getting ready to go on the market in November, and they said it was $575,000, which is a $70,000 jump. Like 70 out of that number is like 15%. That is a significant change in market. And I ended up disagreeing with the person, and we listed at a higher number, and ultimately now we're on the market for $599. So if we miss, I'm going to go through a few things. The first thing we do before we make a commitment on any type of a property is we get two opinions, internally and externally, and we verify that our opinion is correct on the outside from somebody else. And usually we might be off by a couple $1,000, 10 grand, but we're usually not off by 70. But when we're speculators in some ways, and especially on high-end stuff, I can't rent a $500,000 house and make money. It's going to cost me money every month to own it. So I've got to be right. So the amount of margin I have in my deal must justify how much the market could drop. So those are the things you have to look at as you kind of do my business and you do it well. So when a market drops 75,000 on a $600,000 price, that's more than your margin. So it kind of cuts you out from a profit perspective. So you have to understand two things. where is the spot where I need to be? And we don't make this mistake a lot, but we do make it. And then if you can give yourself multiple exits. But I think for the example that you're talking about here, if there is a shock to the system, I need to have speed to get through the system fast enough where I don't have 20 houses where we lose money.
I just sold one of my industrial properties, and based on the prevailing cap rates, the property should have been worth probably 2.5 based on today's cap rates. And that would have been a nice increase, but it wouldn't have been enough to get me to sell. But I took a call from the realtor that I typically use, and he said, I think we can sell this for closer to 3. And I said, well, why do you believe that? The market doesn't say that you could do that. And he said, we think we have a buyer. Turns out it was real, but the reason it was our next door neighbor who owned another industrial property. Well, to him, that was a $3 million property because he's going to combine the two. And when this thing, like, he could do a lot more with it. And so I ended up selling because it was $500,000 more to me, bottom line, than the market's worth. But if I'm some other person, I'm looking at, I'm like, wow, the market in Savannah's jumped. I'm going to list this, or I'm going to buy in Savannah. They don't have the details I have. The reason that I got an unusually high random number on that property that sort of forced me to sell was because it was a market of one, Frankie. It was, and if you were looking at that and you're in the space and you think that represents the market, that's called survivorship bias. What survivorship bias means, we forget all of the other data points that don't mix with our agenda, that don't confirm our bias. We forget all of them. It's kind of like, hey, look, Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college. That's the way to be successful. All right, well, I can show you 1 million people that dropped out of college and are living in squalor today. You're comparing 2 billionaires that just happen to make it. That's survivorship bias. When you're like, I'm going to follow that path.
It's like every jackass. It's like every jackass who smokes points to their uncle who lived to 107 and drank and had 5 packs of cigarettes a day. That's an anomaly. That person, like, that's not a skill. That's not a sample set.
You're ignoring all the people that died of emphysema at 40.
Right.
By smoking too much. But that's what survivorship bias is. And, it's kind of, you either have, you see like a small random success, and by doing that, it triggers in you emotions. It triggers, your mind wants to say, this is something that's going to continue. And you have to be able to pull back emotionally from that and not react to it, not react emotionally. Because if you evaluate any decision through alternate histories, and I think this is the important thing, if you and I were pitching in a baseball game, they put our sorry asses in against Barry Bonds, greatest hitter of our life, roided up Barry Bonds, 2002 Bonds, juiced to the gills, right? If we threw him 1,000 meatballs, he'd probably hit 950 home runs. We just threw that fastball. But if they put us in a World Series game, there is one history where he gets under it and pops it up, where he misses it, where it surprises him. And they put us in that game and we throw him one fastball and he pops up and we get the close in the game. You could draw a path to saying we should pitch Frank or Ian tomorrow in the next World Series game because he's the Bonds killer. He got it done. But what you have to be able to do is look at it and say, in an alternate history of 1,000 worlds where Ian got to pitch to Barry Bonds 1,000 times, he hits 990 home runs. That's not the right choice. And, for a manager, for an executive going through this exercise of stopping yourself and saying, what's the normal variance? What's the statistics? What do the stats say if we were to run this 1,000 times? how often would this happen? And you have to be smart enough to say, was that an outlier? Is that survivorship bias? Am I looking at the one piece of luck? Frank, tell the story about Dwight Scharr that time where you built two and everyone got excited and built a whole community around it.
So the hard part to understand going into something like this is something real or is it just an anomaly? And I was at dinner last night with our corporate counsel, someone Ian knows very well, and he's always asked me to go into a different market. He's like, I think your biggest vulnerability is you're only in one market. But I disagree with that for this reason. I know my market very well, and I know if something is a trend or something is a one-off because I know it so incredibly well. And when you go to a new market, you don't, and you can get fooled. My industry is a little bit easier to read because I kind of get those things. When you do a new home community, with new home communities, what you do is you kind of speculate on, is there going to be a want, need, and desire for this particular product? So before I got there, Ryan Holmes had this community that was like on the waterfront in Washington, D.C., which is a very highly desirable neighborhood. Like it's most famous if you have never been to Washington, D.C., because Watergate Hotel is right there. The whatever they call it nowadays, the Kennedy Center is right there. It's the Memorial Bridge that goes over to the Lincoln Memorial. Like it's a beautiful, beautiful parcel of ground. But they were selling really, really small, very, very expensive condos, and they sold two right off the bat. And everybody got so excited. They're like, oh my God, we have two incredible pre-sales. So a pre-sale is a sale that happens before the community even goes on the market. And so everybody's getting excited. What it turns out, they go through development, they go through the building, they build a model home, they build a couple of specs, houses with no contracts. And ultimately all they had was two contracts. So there was a market, but sadly the market was only two. It was it, and there was more than two built. So what that means is that you've missed the mark on the market. And that is something that happens all the time. It's real. And that's something that comes through speculation.
Yeah, that's, and it's not just in real estate, that can happen anywhere.
Anything.
And Frankie, you can see the screen here.
Yep.
So if you're watching on YouTube, you see this. If you're just listening to us, I put a chart up here. And the way to really look at things from a systematic perspective, there's quality of outcome. So either you fail or you succeed. It's binary, and there's probably something in between here. And there's also quality of decision process. How good was the decision? And so I'll give an example. A quality of outcome, I'm driving home from the bars and I had way too much to drink.
Great example.
Okay, I got home safe, and it was a terrible process. I should have never done that. I should have taken an Uber. Well, that's dumb luck, right? So high outcome, bad process. In business, you don't want to reward that by doing more of it. You got lucky, admit you got lucky, don't let it happen again. On the other side of that, I had too much to drink at the bar and I called an Uber. I called an Uber Black to pick me up. And on the way home, a drunk driver hit us. And I ended up in the hospital anyway. Okay, that's a bad break. That's a bad outcome with a great process. Smart process. I hired a driver, but I got a really bad outcome. And that life is unfair. The guy who drunk drives gets home safe all the time. And the person who's responsible, even the sober driver who went to the bar and didn't have a drink and drove his friends home, gets hit by the drunk driver all the time. There's bad breaks and there's dumb luck. Poetic justice is the drunk driver gets in an accident, gets pulled over by a cop and spends the night in jail. That's poetic justice. Bad process meets bad outcome. And then on the other side, great process and great outcome is I was a sober driver. I got everyone home all right. Everyone thanked me in the morning. And most of the time, that's an earned reward that happens. But you've got to ask yourself, whenever there's a great success, an unusual success in your business, was it lucky? Was it dumb luck? Or when it went bad, was it a bad break? And so the examples are, you get a rookie, and in their first month, they do 5 sales on a plan of 2.
It's called beginner's
You
luck.
jump out of
It's
nowhere
sustainable.
saying, yeah, we got the next Miguel Cabrera here. This is fantastic. Everything's great. But what if they did that with a really bad process and against all odds? What if they had three people walk into a model in 1 month that bought that month that they got super lucky? They were going to buy no matter what you did. You could have slapped them in the face. They had already done their homework and they were going to buy. Just the same as if you have one of your best veterans had a bad couple of months, are they just getting some bad breaks? Their process hasn't changed. They just statistically, they're Miguel Cabrera ripping line drives right at the shortstop, ripping, warning track shots that center fielders are tracking down and making great plays. You've got to be able to determine which of those in. Was the quality of the process good? If the answer is yes, leave alone the failure. And just the same, don't just celebrate the success when the process was terrible.
So another word for process is patterns. AI is 100% built on patterns. What the people who started AI, there's basically five major companies, what they've done, they all have access to a lot of data, right? Google has one of the most impressive AI models, and it's completely, totally trained on everything that's coming from all of us through search. And they've got more than just search, but search is it's a huge business and it's pretty telling. So what AI has done is they have built all of their predictive models on patterns of things that have happened in the past. So they take all the information that the internet can provide to it, and then they build a series of thoughts or a series of outcomes that are based upon patterns and things over time with millions of data sets. And some ways AI is incredible. In some ways, it's clearly still needs to improve. But what you look at from that is it all comes down to pattern. The reason that they think in some ways AI will be better than humans is because it has a bigger data set. Their brain is bigger. AI's brain is bigger than any of ours, so it can process more stuff, and they lack human emotion. It could be a problem because they'll hit the button a lot more on the nukes. That's been proven. But at the same time, from a decision-making standpoint, when it gets really, really finely tuned, it will take the pattern and take non-emotional decisions, say, what's the likelihood of this? And it becomes mathematical. What we struggle with a lot of times as human beings is we get emotional. We fall in love with somebody because we had a great first date. We love our kid because they give us a huge hug. We are creatures that love and get off on emotion. And that can happen to us as managers too. We get fooled. We get fooled because of our own biases. So if you use a significant amount of pattern and process, it takes it down. Let's fast forward. You have a rookie who comes in, does an amazing job. Don't shit on them and don't celebrate too much. What you want to talk about is, okay, that was absolutely incredible stuff. How'd you do it? What'd you do? What I try to do with that type of thing is keep their spirits up and then make sure their process matches the result. Because if it doesn't, you can turn somebody who's really great into somebody who isn't. A incredibly gifted salesperson doesn't need to have as much good process, but they need some. So what you have to understand is, do I have a process-bound person who sucks at sales, who just follows process and gets the job done? Do I have someone who's an incredible, incredible performer who's not going to follow process but be able to get good results? Or do I have that person that's in the middle? And what I have learned is it's really hard to mimic we talked about this last week. It's really hard to mimic the superstar, but it's easier to take the person who's in the middle and get the skill set and the process and build it and teach the skills and be able to bolt that on. But as a manager, it's your job not to get too emotional in a high or a low, and understand the steady and calm that it's your job to provide if that person runs into a slump.
I'm working with Frank's warranty manager. Shout out to Rayshawn, my guy. Rayshawn, like me, enjoys gambling. He's more of a poker player. And he was asking me why I don't play poker. And I said, I don't have the patience for it. You have to be patient to play poker. I get antsy, I get bored, and I end up going all in on 2 5s. And that's stupid. Smart people don't do that. I do it because I just get bored and I want to be done playing. So I either want to take a bunch of money and be done or get out. And I'm a much better blackjack player because I don't do that. I I always tell myself whatever I'm cashing in, $500, $1,000, whatever it is, that's it. When I lose it, I'm out. I'm capping my downside. I don't go back to the ATM and put more money in. But in my head, I always have a number. So depending on how much time I have, I might say, I'd like to triple this. If I get to 1,500, I'm out. And, or if I got more time, if I get five, I want a 5X it, or, if we're in Vegas and I'm with Frankie and I don't ever want to leave the table, I'll say 10X is what makes me leave. I'm going to go, we're going to go do something other than blackjack. But for me, what that is that structuring for asymmetry. That's structuring for symmetry. So and there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but the way this looks, again, if you're on YouTube, you can see this slide. There's nothing wrong with losing. You can lose lots of little bits. In the stock market, these are called stop losses. A stop loss just means if I own a stock at $100 per share, at 90, I'm out. So if I made a bad bet and it didn't work out, when it hits 90, all right, I lost 10%, cool, but I'm going to let my winners ride. I'm going to let that. And so that's structuring for asymmetry. In stock markets, you really just need a couple of things to hit big in your life. And where most people screw up is they sell. I owned Google in 2006. I sold in 2007 at like a 40% increase. And I was like, damn, I'm smart. Well, it's up like 200X since then. Probably should have just held on and let that thing ride and sold the other ones. But, just like with me and blackjack, I'm either making 500 or I'm either losing 500 or I'm making 1,500. That's asymmetric structure. That's a process where I tell myself what I'm going to do. I'm not going to double down. I'm not going to put more into this loser. I'm going to make sure that I either make a certain amount and walk away, or I lose a certain amount and walk away.
There's a statistic that if you take your money out of the market for a certain number of days, you pull out of the market, you miss the biggest gains. Now, I don't have the statistic, I'm looking it up. But there's a certain amount of days that if you just ride it out, it makes up for all the losses over time. So the stop loss is, there's two sides to this. As an investor, you should never apologize for taking a profit. Never. So a profit is a good thing. 40% gain is certainly better than a 40% loss. But if you look at it with the eyes of revisionist history, it can get in your way, and you can look at it from the standpoint of, I should have ridden this thing out. So there's also the other side of this, especially when you get into human beings. And what you start to realize is if you've had someone who's a really good performer for years and years and years, but that person is no longer cashing those type of checks. They're no longer producing that way. They have pivoted to something else and they're no longer that. That's called the halo effect. You're judging them on past performance and not future performance. So the whole entire kind of spirit behind this episode is don't get fooled by too much good or too much bad. You have to look at what's the median, and the median over a period of time. And then you have to define what the time is. And as a manager, it's your job to kind of poke and prod up if you need to celebrate on if they're performing really well, and then to look at the median over time. One of my favorite quotes in business or in anything is people are doing one of three things. They're getting better, they're getting worse, or they're staying the same. And as long as people are getting better over time, and again, over time could be over a couple of years, you have a couple of bad months. That's okay, because if you look at the trend line is mostly going up.
You said something important there, as long as they are improving. And improving could be outcomes, but improving could also be process. You could see their skills getting better, their process getting better, and maybe the outcomes are just lagging.
Yep.
You could see that. But also, on the other side of this, we're talking about the really good performer, the Miguel Cabrera having a bad April. You also need to be cognizant of if a non-Miguel Cabrera, let's say a lousy Detroit Tiger, someone who was barely hanging on his whole career, has a bad April. Okay, that's not random. That's who they are. You might be hanging on to a couple of good games they had with 2 hits, but their whole April was lousy. They don't deserve the same benefit of the doubt that Miguel Cabrera does. And just like I talk about limiting your downside, how much does it cost you to keep that person employed month after month after month? What could their replacement be doing? If you could go hire someone for the same cost who is not going, is going to perform at 20, 30, 40% better, what is your opportunity cost of sitting on that person hoping that they're going to turn things around when the trend is clearly down? That would be no different than me continuing to walk to the ATM and getting another $500 out every time I lose it in blackjack, rather than just saying, you know what, not my night. I'm done gambling for the rest of the night.
So understanding the work that goes behind something is critical to managing it properly. And I'll give you an example of this. And for you, those of you who've been listening to this podcast for a lot of years, you're going back to our old stuff. Ian used to talk about Little League Baseball and T-ball. Now it's my turn. My oldest son is in a coach pitch league. And in the beginning of the season, there's probably 20 games. First 5 or 6 games of the season, he had to hit off the tee like half the time because he wasn't hitting the ball. That means he can't locate the ball. His hand-eye coordination isn't strong enough. He doesn't have his mechanics down. So for about the middle 10 games, he was getting better. And then for the last 5 games, he's hit every time he's gotten up bat, he's hit the ball, which is awesome. But if you've been watching the games, you've seen that progression from him. But what you haven't seen is in the backyard, I put in a tee. And he runs out there without anybody looking 5 times a week and swings the bat to hit the tee. And it's for mechanics. It's to work on all the little things. And then he'll ask me 2 or 3 nights a week after work if I'll come in the backyard and throw him wiffle balls that he can hit with his bat. So that is the little stuff that goes into the mechanics. If you're managing someone, what you need to understand is, what are they doing? How are they doing it? I'm going to tell another story. So my nephew was trying to get into the University of Florida and he hasn't gotten in yet. And it's been 2.5 years. Like, he tried to apply in high school, he didn't get in. He's now a sophomore in college and he's almost through his sophomore year. And what I told him the other day is, we're getting to this point where you might need to just say, this is no longer my dream, because you're robbing yourself of your college years. Like, you have your college years in front of you, and what you're worried about is, I'm at the wrong spot. I need to be somewhere else because it's going to be better over there. That's called fear of missing out. So what we talked about was, we're going to give this one more shot. And I asked him like what he was good at, and his strengths and weaknesses were lame. The stories were terrible. They were shit. Frankly, they were shit. And we talked about, if you're going to take one more shot at this, you need to have a compelling conversation with a person, probably in person. So what are you going to do with it? How are you going to do it? How are you going to build a compelling argument? He had never seen the movie 8 Mile. I go, watch it tonight. And then I want you to use the skills that he uses in 8 Mile and talk about what happens in the rap scene at the end, where he cuts the legs out from his competitor in a rap battle because he tells him all the bad things that's happened to him. So tell the administrator all the things that are not great on your resume or not great on your transcript and why you haven't gotten in. And then tell them what you've done to overcome those things to get better. That's how you win an interview. An interview isn't, what are my God-given abilities and strengths? I've always won interviews when I've been able to tell stories about things I wasn't good at and how I made them better, or how I made them great. And what's that process? Because that's the process that takes you from being somebody who's completely new inside of a job to being able to master it and becoming great at it. That's skill set kind of gathering and growth over time. And that's the process that we're getting into here.
Eminem's character in that movie, B Rabbit, works when he's not rapping, works at a place called Dead End Stamping, where they stamp out parts for autos. And fun fact, I worked at a place just like that for an entire summer, which convinced me that I need to get the hell out of Detroit. And you had to wear these earplugs, and this machine would stamp a part. It was the loudest goddamn noise you ever, even with the earplugs dug as deep as you could into your head, that thing, your ears were ringing when you left.
Do you remember the story that you told me? I was going to ask you a few minutes ago, but I didn't know if you'd recall it, and I didn't want to put you in a spot. There's a story you told me about, like, you set some kind of a record and one of the workers gave you a hard time about it. Tell that story real quick.
Yeah, it was a Tower Automotive. So they the union was close to forming a picket line and going on strike. They were trying to negotiate a new contract. And I was friends with a lot of the guys because I was young and I got along with a lot of the union guys out on the floor. And as an engineer, that was more of an engineering internship where I would have to go out on the floor and take measurements, and I would talk to folks, and they were all fun guys out in the union. And we got the one weekend they did strike, and we had to go out and work on the line. And so I went and worked, and we were stamping out parts. And so I went and worked on the line, and I got the hang of it. And it's a boring ass job. You're like pressing 3 buttons, moving along. And as the day went on, I kept getting faster and faster. And for me, I was just trying to make a game of it to not fall asleep while I was there. It was so boring. But I ended up putting a crazy number up of parts that I did in a shift. And all of the union guys got really pissed at me. They came and they were like, hey, we understand you have to work on the line. We get it. Like, your management, you'll lose your job if you say no. We get that you're crossing the picket line. You're not union. You're a college kid, whatever. But they pulled these guys aside and they were like, listen, we could all do that number of parts in a shift too. You're going to leave in 2 months and go back to college. This is our career. Could you keep that pace up for 30 years, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, that pace? Could you do that? And it was like one of the older guys that brought me aside, and they were pissed at me, but they were just trying to rationalize with me.
An incredible lesson.
I was an outlier. I just hustled my ass off, and I like doubled what the guys normally do for a quota in a shift. And part of me, like cocky young kid, was like, these lazy turds, we could be doing double the profit out of this shop. But it was really good where he's like, yeah, you did that once. What if this was your life? What if you had to do this every day? Would you, and you think about, would you sprint every day through every shift? You had a perfect day as a young 21-year-old here in the shift. And I was fooling management by randomness, where they're like, look what Ian did. We could do that all the time. That's fooled by randomness. That's a young kid busting out crazy amount. Well, how are you going to find that many motivated 21-year-olds to work that? It wasn't realistic to think that you would get a union worker to put out that kind of an effort every day of their life.
The other thing that happened in that, it's exactly what I wanted you to say. The other thing that happened in that is this: people that work in unions usually aren't the brightest. They're not entrepreneurial. They're usually using the union helps kind of keep them protected. And I'm not saying there's anything against unions. I'm just saying it's kind of a commodity, and you're being protected so you don't get completely shit on like they used to do 100 years ago to people that worked in factories or on buildings. So unions are by and large very good things, but it's not where the brilliant come to work or to manage. And what the union guys were worried about is their bosses weren't smart enough to realize Ian was an anomaly for a couple of days. And what they were worried about is the baseline was going to go up, and then they were not going to be able to produce at that level. Their careers would get shorter. If they did produce at that level, they get hurt, and they wouldn't be able to provide for their families. So they were able to synthesize what was happening and the fact that this is the way the system here works. It's not really doing any good. It's while the dystopian novels freak you out is there's no incentive for any type of initiative. But if you looked at it from that perspective, that's what those people were teaching you. You did a really good thing, but it worked against them because the system, it's an outlier to the system, which I thought was really cool.
They did a good job of compelling me too, because the next day I did half the units.
Yeah.
I slowed down. I went slower. I realized, okay, I don't want to screw these guys and get their quotas doubled. And now the rest of their lives are screwed because I was a dick in my summer internship. Like, I got it. I understood.
It's also kind of a little bit like communism, right? There's like what really pisses off people in communism. It's not the people who drink a lot of vodka and don't really do much with their potato farms. It's the people who are entrepreneurial or want to grow their potato farms, and you're taking away all that initiative. As a manager, what you have to be very careful of is you have to not be fooled. You have to understand if someone actually has a process. And then what you really need to be good at is rewarding the people who are stars or are stars because of their ethics, their work, the process they put in, and their ability to retain and scale off the top of it. Those are people that we look for in my company. Is how do you take setbacks? How do you learn from them? How do you take successes and how do you learn from them? Ian was glowing earlier about Ray Sean because of the things he's listened to and he's paid attention to and how he's using things from 10 weeks ago and he's quoting it and talking about how that was that, and then using those skill sets and building off of it. And the hope and goal with someone like a Ray Sean or anybody else going through this program or anybody listening is you understand those things. I have a new manager, someone who's in your class. I'm not going to name this person. I was talking with her today about how she's managing and using little things or asking certain questions or giving little nuggets. Like that's the whole process here. It's understanding. I've said it here 100 times. I'm going to say it again. My favorite lesson in business is this: see everything, forgive a lot, fix a little. See everything, understand what's happening with the process. Don't bring up most of it. Give a couple of little nuggets and hope that person gets just a little bit better every single day over time, and you're going to have a star.
What do you say? What's the 3 parts again? See everything.
See everything, forgive a lot, fix a little.
Does that work with diet? Curious.
No, it does not. See everything.
Eat everything, right? Crap a lot. Is there like 3, the Frank Cava, have you transferred that yet?
No.
I'm going to just finish with Frank has a couple of people that are in real estate, but also got into Bitcoin. And every once in a while they will troll him. Do you get text from your Bitcoin owners when the price of Bitcoin is down 50% ever?
Never.
Never.
Right? So let me, I'm going to go a little deeper here and then you can finish it off. So there's this one guy who I used to work with pretty intimately, and all he talks about is Bitcoin. And it's so effing annoying about this Bitcoin. I think I've told Ian the story. So one day I pulled him aside and the dude had 27 coins. So like we're talking $3 million, which is like a third of the amount of real estate I moved last month. And like all he's talking about is this effing Bitcoin because it went through the roof. And I finally looked at him, I said, do you understand what you're doing to the room? You're getting everybody all ginned up over something that if you just had good fundamentals and stuck with something for a long time would be a very, very small number.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring that up is Frank and I are good friends, and I will send him something when I lose money on a stock and be like, oh, look at this. This is down quite a bit. And I'll send him stuff when stocks are doing good just because it's news. He tells me I lost my ass on that deal or this one really worked out really well. You have to, Frank talked about being rational. The reason why AI makes better decisions on the aggregate and gives better advice on the aggregate is it is rational. We are irrational. And so you have to, being fooled by randomness, a lot of times you have to be careful with the social treadmill. More money is lost by chasing something someone already did than you could even imagine. Someone tells you like, hey, my Bitcoin's up 10x. They don't tell you they sold 80% of it every time it went up 20% and it's still, they didn't hold the whole thing. And so then what happens? You run out and buy it at 120,000. Then it drops to 65. You panic. You didn't have enough in the first place, and you sell it at a 50% loss. The time to go chase the randomness is not after it's hit the all-time high and you heard someone tell you how great it was and that they've gotten rich and they bought a car. The time to buy it, if you're going to, is when they're not talking to you because they just got their ass kicked and it's down 50, 60%. I told Frank I've been dipping back into crypto pretty heavy over the last 6 months. It's been down quite a bit. It might go down a little bit more. I don't have so much in it that I would have to panic sell at any point, but I learned that lesson as a kid when one of my best friends from high school got into penny stocks, made $1 million, quit his job and bought a Mustang. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm working around the friggin' clock. And what did I do? I went out and bought a bunch of penny stocks. His next bets, I got in on the next ones. It was like, and you know what, Frankie? He was Blue Star Airlines. He had one good idea that made him $1 million. His next 3 were dog shit. They didn't work at all.
Pensions.
I took 100% loss on like $15,000 I didn't have at the time. I didn't have it. I didn't have 15,000 to lose. I put everything I had because I desperately wanted to buy a Mustang and quit my job and be a day trader. It looked awesome. But guess what? I got fooled by randomness. I got caught up in the social treadmill. I was happy until I found out that he was rich, and then I wasn't happy anymore. And then guess what? I became less happy because I tried to chase. It didn't work. I lost a bunch of money, and I still had the same job, but now I was less happy.
There's something going around the internet. You know who Eric Church is?
Yeah. Just saw him a couple months ago.
Did you see the thing on the internet where he did the commencement speech at the University of North Carolina?
No.
So he was famous already, but it kind of came out that he was a huge UNC fan because he had a concert in Dallas that he canceled because UNC was in the Final Four, and he canceled his show. And he apologized to everybody. He goes, but I'm canceling the show. I'm going to the Final Four. He goes, I'm sorry. And he's kind of a bad boy. That's kind of the thing he does, right? So a few years later, UNC rewards him and they give him a commencement speech. And I'll just give you the really quick version of this. He walks out.
I guarantee, though, he did something for those folks in Dallas because he is
he made it up 100%. He made it. He canceled it. He was honest about it. People are like, why don't you say you're sick? He goes, come fucking Eric Church. I'm gonna go to the show and someone's gonna catch me and it's gonna be on social media. It's gonna be
I'll get caught.
It's gonna be, speaking of process, he understands the process. Like he knew he was gonna get busted. He owned up to it. He's like, this might damage me in some ways, but I'll figure out a way to make it right. But this is amazing. So they offer him the speech to do the commencement. And as they give him the speech, he talks about how hard it was to write the speech. He goes, I've had ups, I've had downs, I've had crumpled pieces of paper. He goes, I couldn't get started and I couldn't get anything good. So someone hands him a guitar. So he goes, so I decided to just pick up a guitar. And I said, all right, damn it. I'm going to put a guitar as a part of this. And he just goes through and he starts talking about the strings. And he goes through this entire thing and is just awesome. He relates the whole entire thing to the strings. But there's something in there that he says that I thought was really, really incredible. He talks about one of the strings on the guitar, which one it is, I don't know. But it's the thick string. And he goes, this is your family. This is the stuff that matters the most in your life. This is the stuff that's going to carry you through the hard times. And he goes, what you're going to understand about this string is it's going to be there for you, even though you don't deserve it sometimes. He goes, and what the world's going to do is it's going to kick you down because social media puts all these people into a way in this perfectly pristine world where you judge yourself based upon others and you hold yourselves to a fake standard. And it's a wonderful speech. He finishes with a song. It's amazing. But you were saying a minute ago, made me think of that and made me think of something else that we both love. When everybody is telling you to do something, that's called being greedy. When people are greedy, you need to be fearful. But then when people are fearful, that's the time to be greedy. And you have to look at the fundamentals. So that's the type of stuff that you have to pay attention to in this whole thing. Most human beings, the easiest thing, so I'll use one last example. You know this. The easiest way to make money gambling, and it's a hard thing to do, but the easiest thing to do is just bet against the public because they're emotional. If you just look at where, if the public thinks that this team has a 91% chance of covering against the spread, there is almost a certainty that they will not because the public is going the wrong way because they're emotional and rooting for their team and using all the wrong signals to make their choices.
Bet against the Dallas Cowboys.
100, yeah.
Always bet against them. The money is on them irrationally all the time. So you, dear listeners, are betting on Frank and Ian, and we appreciate you for that. So for all of you that have been giving us 5-star reviews, we thank you, and we will continue to send you cotton T-shirts with our logo on it. Frankie, great to see you, buddy.
It's a little of a change of pace today, a little randomness. We were filmed in the afternoons. It's a little different than 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, don't get fooled by our energy here. We'll be back with our same old half-ass version next time.
Exactly. See you, buddy.
See you, Frank.